Hello. Hello and welcome to this presentation, Why Polyglot? I'm Richard Simcott, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm very glad that you made it to be here for the presentation today, so thank you for joining me. So when we talk about polyglots, we often have this idea of this superhuman style person who can do all sorts of weird and wonderful things, and it's kind of possibly I've used a little bit of comedy in creating this with ChatGPT and had a lot of fun in the process, because I do kind of get this impression sometimes when we talk about this whole polyglot stuff and being at the polyglot gathering and being someone who is sitting around with this label of polyglot as well. It's extremely interesting for me to delve into what this means. So I mean, why polyglot? I mean, for me personally, I'm from a city in the northwest of the United Kingdom called Chester. This is, in fact, the city where I grew up, and this is the Roman Wall, where I'm stood actually on one of the turrets to take this photo. And this is on the border of England and Wales. We hear Welsh and obviously English too, and there are some other languages that you hear from other people. For me personally, I'm from an English and Welsh background. I had Welsh words in my English growing up, and I also had an influence from a stepmom from Thailand too. So I had this kind of interest or different language background always. And so yeah, that's kind of my personal start to life. And my original dialect of English is also quite different from the way I'm speaking now. So I've even had dialectal differences in my English, and I suppose this set the scene for my own language journey. I was traveling quite a lot as a child as well. I was very fortunate in that I could go on holidays with my family to different places, and also later go on my own and visit people I knew, visit friends, and see different places. And obviously when you're doing that and you go and you meet other children at hotels where you're staying around the pool, or in the restaurants or wherever you are, you hear these different languages from the local people who live in the place where you're on holiday, and also people coming from different countries. So I would often hear children from Scandinavia, from Germany, from France, from Spain, from you name it, from all sorts of places around the world. And it always intrigued me how they would use these different words and different languages to say different things and play together and communicate together and speak to their families and all these things that I was doing, but they were using different words for it. And it sounds very basic, but it's that kind of basic idea that really has driven me all this time to learn. And I saw it as a bridge. So it was this is in fact a bridge in Chester that goes across from one side of the city of the River Dee, which is underneath, to the other. And whenever I see bridges, I always think of this linking between one side to another, one culture to another, one language group to another. And this, I guess, is sort of the thing that's going on in my head. You're always kind of reaching out, and like this bridge and an arm reaching out to reach the other side, to be familiar with the other side, to get to know the other side. And I guess this is and has been and still continues to be a motivation for me, as I'm sure it is for many others. It wasn't until one train ride I was on holiday going to visit friends in France. I was on the TGV, which is a fast train that goes all across France. And I'd flown to Paris. I was 14 years old. I was sitting there and I started to talk to some of the other people who were on the train. And I spoke in French because I'd had French at school as a child in the UK, and I was going to visit my friends who were also French speaking, so I spoke to them in French too. And so I felt very comfortable speaking French at 14. They were all kind of a bit shocked that, first of all, I was 14 traveling across France on my own, and also that I was speaking French. They were asking me lots of questions, and they sort of didn't quite believe the story of me being this old and traveling across France by train. And you're talking when was it? Early 90s, I guess. So this is a long time ago, before we had mobile phones and things. It wasn't, I guess, the most ordinary thing to see or to come across as a local in France. And here I was traveling and sitting opposite a gentleman who didn't look anything like this, to be fair, but you know, ChatGPT will forgive you. And I was chatting away to him, and he said to me, "Oh, you're like a polyglot," because he kind of asked me these questions about, you know, my background and language and all that kind of stuff. And he said, "Yes, we're polyglot. Ah, t'es polyglot. T'es bilingue. You're a polyglot. You're bilingual." And these aren't words that really were in my vocabulary at that point, not to any great degree or any significance. I may have heard them, or bilingual probably I had heard, but polyglot definitely hadn't. And that was kind of when that word first entered my vocabulary. And I remember the train ride, and I remember the person, and I remember being in France, and I remember the general conversation. I don't remember word for word, but I do remember the setting. And this is where the word polyglot really sort of became something that was something I even had in my head as an idea, as a thought, as a thing that existed. And so this was me, this cat in a dog world, barking, woof, 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 around these dogs who were like, "Oh, that's a funny cat that can woof like us, barking like us." And this is kind of the feeling that I had, this like cool thing where you could talk to the other people who weren't like you and had come from a different background and had a different, you know, sort of social experience and life experience and historical viewpoint as well on things that had happened and things that had been and things that were to come and what was normal to talk about. And here was me entering that world, and this is kind of the image that to this day is in my head of me being this weird looking cat that goes and infiltrates other countries and their cultures and talks to people. And this is kind of how I also feel I'm perceived at times as well. Even to this day here in the Balkans, I often feel that people look at me as this weird cat that meows like them but shouldn't in a weird way. But yeah, it wasn't really a thing. And really, this becoming a polyglot was something that came as a result of, you know, me going through this point of finding the internet being a thing, YouTube being a thing, people getting to talk to each other who also had this, you know, dream or desire to learn more and more languages. But the idea of becoming a polyglot wasn't really a thing. This is something I think that came afterwards. It was really on these forums where they had a polyglot idea of people who liked multiple languages getting together and speaking, and then making videos and talking to other people who were also intrigued and interested in learning multiple languages. That was when this really became a thing, where people would start watching my videos, Lucas' videos, Stu J's videos, and then later Moses McCormick. You had videos from Benny Lewis, videos from now later Steve Kaufman as well, and many people who you'll have heard of in this community, and then people who have come again like Lindy Bortas, Judith Meyer, Lydia Machova. You can name many people, I'm sure, and probably a lot more than me. But this is a thing that then became a question. I want to become a polyglot. How do I do it? And this is why I thought of this whole thing of why polyglot. What is it about polyglot or polyglotism or being a polyglot that fascinates people? For me, making those videos in the beginning was less about me being a polyglot and using that word because it was the only word I had to reach out to other people who liked what I liked. And that was kind of a unique thing, building those bridges, as I was always trying to do, learning just one or two languages, but now building those bridges to reach other people who liked multiple languages. But this becoming a polyglot became a real thing and still is today. And I've always found it intriguing because when you start out with I want to become a polyglot, it's really like a mad rush to catch all of the butterflies with one net. This image was what was in my head when I thought of, you know, how do you chase all of them at the same time? Because you can only kind of catch a couple of butterflies before you have to put them somewhere and then go after more. And you can't really be with all of the butterflies all of the time, just like you can't be with all of the languages all of the time. So I always found it quite an interesting thing, because it was never that kind of a chase for me growing up. It was more of a, I'm interested in this thing, and then you just kind of catch one, and then you almost go and you catch more, but knowing what to get. And now it seems that going after polyglot in the beginning feels more like a after all butterflies kind of chase. Sometimes this can be because, you've got all of these books out there and you want to read them in different languages. And there are people like this too. These are more your kind of polymaths and dipping into many, many books. And I'm sure, like many of the people, you and I have all had the experience that, you buy so many books and then you don't even know which ones to pick up or choose or what to do. And it gets very confusing and also very exciting at the same time. There's kind of an excitement, confusion, and everything else in between with these feelings. Of course, when you do this and you make the videos on YouTube or on Instagram or on TikTok or wherever you make them, there's this kind of keyboard warrior figure or figures that come out, and they think you're trying to sell them something. They think you're trying to fool them. And so this idea of a snake oil salesman that you're becoming because you're trying to do this thing. So it's an interesting kind of place to position yourself as a polyglot, because why would you want this as well? This that comes with it sometimes too. And people switch this off. Some people don't worry about this, but other people do. Other people really get worried about it. Finding these people who are the snake oil salespeople of the polyglot world, or people who worry themselves about being perceived as such. You could also be seen as the shockerglot. So this person who films themselves going into different places and shocking the locals with their knowledge of languages. I mean, this has never really been a thing that I've done, but this is something that has happened to me. And I mean, I don't film it necessarily, but it does shock people sometimes. And even if you know just one word, I mean, I was in Taiwan fairly recently, and I spoke some Chinese to people, and my very basic Chinese was enough to shock people. And people saying, "Oh, it's wonderful how well you speak Chinese," and my Mandarin is awful. I mean, it really is. But this shockerglot thing is a real thing, because if you get that reaction, it can be quite addictive, and it can be something that sort of drives your endorphins to do more of it. And I get it, and I don't know if it's a bad thing, a good thing, or something in between, but it's a thing. And this shockerglot thing can be something that keeps you doing the same thing over and over again. Maybe you don't move past it, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But I think it's always worth kind of highlighting that these things exist, and I think people talk about it a lot. You could also be a braggaglot, which I think is possibly a little less exciting for people around you, where you almost feel compelled to share your knowledge of language and find languages. I don't know if I would describe myself as a braggaglot, but I do feel sometimes this urge to share linguistic tips and knowledge and etymologies, because I find them interesting myself, and I have to keep trying to kind of hold myself back from doing this too much, because I'm conscious that not everyone's necessarily going to be impressed or excited or interested even in this. But this is my natural kind of thing that I love to talk about language. I just have certain groups of people that I don't talk to about language because it's not their world. And for fear of becoming the braggaglot, where you just talk about how much you know and how amazing you are, it can kind of feel a bit, off-putting, I guess, to other people. And you see the reactions as well when you come across a braggaglot. I've come across braggaglots myself, and it can be kind of interesting when you're in a conversation or explaining things you already know. I always feel it's nice to go into a mode of, let's ask open questions to see how far this person's interested and has an awareness of this topic before I info dump on them. Then there's the fake glot. The fake glot is another thing where you get these people who will learn a couple of words or phrases in various languages and just use those and trot them off. And these are called out very often online. I don't particularly feel the need to do that myself, but one of the things of being a fake glot is Is it better to learn a couple of words or none at all? And so I'm not always completely against the idea of doing it. I guess it's if you get to the point where you're fake glotting and you pretend that that's not what you're doing, and you are actually not able to say more than a couple of words, but put yourself out as being able to do a lot more than you can do, then I guess that's where people start talking about fakes and fake polyglots or fake glots. So these are other things that I've seen people fall into in terms of traps online and things that people have been called out for. So yeah, this road to polyglot feels like quite a road. It's quite long. It's quite high up in terms of learning to speak with a deal of authenticity or to high levels a number of languages. And all of the pitfalls that I've shown you with people calling people out for various different, being a fake glot or being a braggaglot or whatever else. These are all sort of pitfalls along the way that we can fall into. And so I always question, what is it about this polyglot that's then is the desired end goal? Is it the end goal? What in fact is this thing? Because when you're walking on that road, actually there are lots of plateaus, and the plateaus are the things that people talk about the intermediate plateau, but I personally feel that plateaus happen at all levels in this journey, and I think that we don't talk about them very often because they're boring. What the reality of learning languages, in terms of that path to becoming a polyglot, it's actually quite a boring one for a lot of people, because the topic of this sort of ritual of study every day and reading some texts and then sort of listening to things and repeating things and making lots of mistakes and forgetting lots of words and rinse and repeat until it happens less and less. It's not the most exciting of journeys. The exciting bits are at the beginning, where you're learning lots of new vocabulary, and from zero you can all of a sudden say lots of quite general things about yourself and introduce yourself and talk about your life and start piecing things together. And then obviously when you get to a point where after you've learnt many subjects, you can then start combining the subjects to make a real nice conversation, and then you start to sort of deepen the knowledge with different words and expressions and idioms to take it to that next level. And it's those bits in between which are actually the longest bits, that these plateaus, I guess, is a good word for it, but they happen at every stage. This can all be very confusing and very daunting, and can make you feel almost lost in a whirl of words and grammar and getting it wrong and not understanding it. And all of a sudden you can talk about one subject in a language pretty well, but then the subject topic will switch, and it will switch like that, and you don't have time to almost reassess or to steer things, or maybe you don't feel so confident, so you all of a sudden feel confused and frustrated, and it's just like you can't perform to that level all the time. And then of course time is not always on your side. I mean, you have other things to do, right? So the note on this desk I like that ChatGPT put on for me, remember you have a social life too. So not always are these things conducive to your other social activities, or to your work, or to your family, or to your other commitments going on around you. And so it can be quite a time-consuming thing. Learning a language it's an endeavor. And then learning multiple is quite a lot, so you can feel demotivated. You've got all these plateaus that you're going through. Maybe you've done one language, two languages, three languages. You're getting to another one and another one and another one, and it's like, when does it stop? These things carry on because you've got a lot to balance, right? A lot of things that you have to kind of get into harmony in your life. And so when you're talking about learning multiple languages and you're talking about dividing your time, well, how much time have you got to divide? And then also, how much time have you got to divide to actually use them too? Because these are real issues when it comes to learning languages, and particularly when you get to learning multiple languages, because you can only divide a certain amount of time. You can't go on forever. The day's only got a certain number of hours, and you have other things that you need to do. And then when you've learned a number of languages, some of the issues that people face, even if you're not kind of putting yourself out there on YouTube or on social media and being labeled a braggaglot or a fake glot or whatever else, you can have this feeling of imposter syndrome, because particularly if you're learning languages that are similar to each other, and you don't really feel that comfortable with some of the vocabulary because it's kind of, you're borrowing bits from other languages to make them fit and make them piece together. Do I really speak Czech and Slovak and Polish? Do I really speak Swedish, Danish, and Norwegian? Do I really speak, these similar languages that have got a lot in common? Do I really speak Spanish and French and Catalan and Italian and Sicilian and Napolitano, or all of these things that you see these things and you think, oh, can I really then now learn Galician? And you almost feel like you've got this imposter syndrome because you'll then see somebody else online, or you'll hear of someone, or you'll meet somebody and they've studied very different languages, or people will be having talks on threads online as well about what constitutes a language. Is it a real language? If it's so similar, have you really done the same amount of work? And you can have these kind of feelings, and that they're also pretty negative on this journey, where you think, oh, am I a fake? Am I an imposter? Am I not really doing this? Am I not really in this position? These will have an effect on how we feel. Of course, while we're doing this and while we're actually learning the languages, and when we feel that we've got something to click, we do have this, and there's a genuine benefit from learning languages, multiple languages particularly, is that you feel the effect on your brain. You feel that you are improving your ability, you're improving your awareness of many of the adjacent cultures, adjacent languages that are similar, languages that have met culturally, even if they're not related, because of borders, and then also had borrowings from one language to another across language groups. And you do feel this on your brain, and it is good for your brain, and it is good for neuroplasticity, and it does help with your memory, and it does help to, to do many, many things, including thinking about jobs that you want to do, places you want to study, things that, opening opportunities and doors to doing things that you never thought were possible. These real, tangible benefits do exist with learning multiple languages. When I went to work on a German team for a project for 6 months in Manchester, I could have just used German and everyone would have been fine with that because that's all I was contracted to do. But to make that job more exciting for me and to also use my other languages, I offered to take overflow calls in other languages. And so I was doing that in Dutch, I was doing that in Swedish, I was doing that in French and in Italian and in Spanish. And before I knew it, I'd added, I think, about 8 languages to this, repertoire that I was using on a daily basis. So it makes your job sometimes more exciting, more enjoyable, because you're using it. It's also good for you. It's stimulating. And also, it can often lead to other opportunities because you're adding skill sets and experience professionally to languages you speak. Maybe you studied on your own, but you're adding this professional layer to it that you can then take to other opportunities as well. This can be, varied. I mean, you've got labels here of different professions that you can use your languages with, but languages combine with pretty much anything, because you can use your languages wherever you are in the world to move to other countries, to look at new possibilities, new options in other places. And of course, meeting people, making friends, making even new family. These languages that you learn, multiple languages, you never know when you're going to need them. So living in the Balkans, as I do, and using, for example, Macedonian at home, for my generation, my entire generation, also knows Serbian, because they grew up learning Serbo-Croat at school. So actually, for me, that was really important. This multilingual element of my life is very important because a lot of jokes are in Serbian or Croatian, Montenegrin, Bosnian, and they have relevance, to my today life, the life that I have at the moment present. It's very important that I understand these languages, understanding the differences with Bulgarian, and knowing Albanian, and knowing Turkish, and knowing the origins of words that intersect all of these languages. This has all been, first of all, enriching, but also allowed me to talk to people that I wouldn't normally be able to talk to and interact in very different ways, because you're showing this level, this crossover of languages that intersect cultures. You know, in Italy and in France, La Macedonia, they don't mean mixed fruit salad for nothing. They have their origins in this mix, this cultural and linguistic mix that is the Balkans. And so these things can really enhance your experience wherever you are in the world, because cultures are very seldom just in sort of a vacuum where there's monolingualism going on. There's often, whether it's multiple dialects or multiple languages, there's always some sort of mix going on. And of course, this gives you motivation to continue and to learn the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And this is kind of where I feel I am. It's this constant desire to move on and to learn more and more, and to learn adjacent languages more and more, and to also learn new languages more and more. I mean, you know, it never hurts to learn something new. Even if you forget a lot of it, it doesn't really make a big difference. It gets to a point where it's like, okay, I'll just learn something just to kind of widen my view, my horizons a little bit more. So, you know, you're never going to get an orange for speaking many languages. There aren't any polyglot awards. I know that there have been polyglot competitions and things in the past, but genuinely, if you're doing this, you're doing it for yourself. You're not doing it for some sort of award. And okay, you could be going back to some of those things where, you know, you want to sell something. I don't know, but that's all well and good. But the actual physical thing that you feel in your head learning these languages, and the tangible relationships that you build, they're your reward. That beauty of the color of the world changing because you get to see more of the nuances, that's your reward. That's the award you get for learning multiple languages. It's you don't get an orange unless somebody's very kind enough to give you one. But you don't. In fact, whenever I talk to people who are talking about learning languages, I always say, you know, look at the paths that are interesting for you. There are many paths to take, but it's finding the one or the ones that are right for you. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to head with this? What's the point of doing this? You know, it all comes down to you psychologically, what is important to you. Because if learning one language is your thing, do it. It's fine. If learning 3 languages is your thing, fine. If learning 10 languages is your thing, also fine. If learning 100 is your thing and you only want to do like a very quick basic learning basic words in all of them, fine. But the road you take is the road you take, and it's being happy on the road you take and the destination that you reach because of the road you took and because of what it means to make a decision like that. That's where it becomes important. Do you want to be a polyglot that learns a few languages really well? Do you want to be a polyglot that learns a few more languages, but maybe not all of them to the same level? Do you want to be a polyglot that just goes and you try and learn as many as you can, and you don't really mind about the level that you learn them to? You're happy just like exchanging niceties in each place and introducing yourself and ordering something at a restaurant. You could do that in many languages. There's nothing more or less rewarding. In my book, I think it's a very personal journey. And that's why I say it's the path you decide and you choose, and how you want to do it that's important. So choose a path, look out over the horizon and decide where you want to go. And look at the path and remember there are always shortcuts onto another path if you want to, because you can change, you don't have to stick to the one you're on. Languages for me are kind of like fruits as well. I mean, some of the paths that you choose in life are the small fruits, the fruits that people don't even maybe think about, or they mix in with something else. So these could be representative of languages that people don't typically study, languages that are typically bundled in with other languages people learn. They're seen as dialects, or they're seen as lesser languages in some way. These for me are the indigenous, endangered and vulnerable language groups that I'm very much committed to and I enjoy learning. And I find that the taste of these fruits can be quite exquisite. But you don't have to do that. You can go for your watermelon, you can go for your apples, your oranges, your bananas, the ones that people typically learn. You can learn whatever you want. You can even have a bite of a number of these different fruits and experience them. You don't have to commit to all of them. You can commit to some and then still widen that expertise to understand how some of the dialects or language sister languages, or, interact and interrelate. For me, this in the end becomes dots on a page that I'm slowly but surely linking up to uncover a picture. And that picture is something then I get to colour in and to enjoy looking at, to show to other people, and then to hopefully expand. So this one page would then, in theory, grow even bigger to show you a bigger picture of things. And this, for me, is where Polyglot is a thing that I enjoy doing and being and embodying and living. So for me, why Polyglot is this. It's joining the dots together between languages to unpick and unravel and see a picture that unites all of the dots together, to understand the etymologies, to understand the histories, to understand the cultures and all of these interrelations and interactions between them all. And that's why Polyglot. You do you, Glot. Choose what you want to do and do what's right for you, not because other people are doing it and not because anyone says you have to. You do you, Glot. Thank you so much for listening to me, and very happy to take questions now. From Hannah, how do you maintain all of your language skills? Do you have any tips on a system? So I don't tend to worry too much about it, Hannah, to be honest. This is why I say I always think that you're going to use the ones that you use because they're necessary for you at a time. So there are languages I've studied and I don't have much need for them in the part of the world I'm in at the moment. So languages like Estonian and Finnish, for example, that I studied and got to a point where I was maybe like an A2 level, I could get by and certainly have a conversation or even an interview, which I did in Estonian, but they seem to go quite quickly if you're not really using them or related languages. I don't really know why some languages stick around a little bit more than others. So weirdly, Hungarian has stuck around in my head a little bit longer, and I'm not sure why, but it just is the way it is. I suspect it's because there are words that are in common because of the geography of Hungary and being close to the Balkans and being also a language that's spoken in the Balkans, that there's been this interactivity. So sometimes I find that speaking one language helps me to remember or reminds me of the other languages. And typically that happens a lot more with related languages in my brain. I'm thinking more about the differences than the things that they have in common. So if I only have to focus on the differences, it's a lot less to remember, if that makes sense, when I'm learning. What are the advantages and disadvantages in your experience of competency in so many languages, but engaging with individual ones less deeply by virtue of having less time? Melissa, thank you for that question. So yeah, I don't see this either as a kind of an on-off switch. You either do this or you do that. I think you can focus on a certain number of languages that are important to you or you use a lot, and then also have another room with a dimmer switch where things go, or if you imagine a house with lots of rooms and they've all got dimmer switches, some of them you can turn right up and have them bright so that you go into a lot of detail. Others can be on quite low where it's almost barely visible in the rooms. And I think you can have as many rooms as you want where you do that with the dimmer switch right down. But does that necessarily affect the ones where it's always bright? Well, it depends how many you have with the very bright light on, I suppose. If you're using certain languages just for work and for your social life or for your home life, then it's more natural that they're going to be turned up a lot more brightly than other ones. So I don't know if it's an either or, but an and then a case of how often are you using them. So there are always going to be dips in the brightness of all of these rooms from time to time, just because your life changes, your focus changes, bumps in the road occur, things happen in life that change what you can do and how you can do it. And so these are often beyond your control. So yeah, I don't know how much they are more, an either or, more of an and then looking out for what goes on in the way. I hope I answered that for you. So Daria asks, how can I be a polyglot in a culture that doesn't encourage that? I'm from a culture that doesn't encourage that, and a lot to do with not really worrying about what other people think. Something was said to me many, many years ago, and I think this is very important. So I have the right to my own thoughts. You have the right to your own thoughts. I don't have the right to your thoughts, and you don't have the right to my thoughts. And my right to my thoughts stops where your nose begins. And I'm never going to be able to make everyone happy all of the time. And if I try to, I'm going to make most people unhappy most of the time, because I'll be bending and changing too much. So you almost have to get used to the idea of some people will not like you and will react negatively to things that you do and say and think and feel and things that you practice in life. And as unfortunate and as uncomfortable as that can be at times, it's the stark reality of life. And so if you're in an environment or a culture where that's not encouraged, or people don't like that, or it's not normal, it's learning not to care, unfortunately, is the very sad reality. And it can be quite empowering and also allow you to sort of not worry too much anymore. I mean, if I were to look at every comment that I saw online about me, I probably wouldn't leave the house. But I do, and I still learn my languages, and I still continue, because it's in my brain that I get the reward, and it's the interactions that I have with individuals who are not from that way of thinking that I get the rewards, because you need the positives from different places sometimes, and it's finding your tribe often outside of your country and outside of your community is often the thing, which is one of the reasons why I started making videos online, because I wanted to find my tribe, and I did. Here you are, and you're all lovely. Melissa asked, what are the advantages of this function? Oh, yeah, oh, 1 second. Sorry, I think I got it bounced up on my screen. Okay. Yorgos asks, would you star a dream movie for your Polyglot? Would I be a star in a dream movie for a Polyglot community? That's quite an interesting thing. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I'd never really considered that at all. So I'm kind of caught off guard. But I've appeared on TV shows and in interviews for people talking about polyglotism and the polyglot world. And I mean, I'm happy to talk about it, because I remember not having anybody when I was young to kind of look up to as somebody who learned multiple languages. And it's one of the other reasons why I made videos, because I wanted to give hope to people who were also growing up the way I did, where it wasn't the norm. You didn't meet people who learned or studied or spoke multiple languages. Kareem asks, which skill sets do you prioritize as a polyglot? Speaking, listening, reading, and writing. It really depends on the language, Kareem, to be honest. So some languages, you know, I'm not necessarily going to need to read or write or as much. Or other languages I might not need to be speaking or listening to so much. It's a very interesting question. It really depends on how I see the language being used in my life. So languages like, for example, being able to read Slovene or Slovak or something, understanding it in the written word is probably more important, or listening is more important than speaking or writing, because I don't need to really do that so often. And also I find that those languages get sucked into my other languages that are similar, so I don't tend to worry about that too much. So yeah, it really depends on the language and the languages that I'm learning, but it can be interesting sometimes to do more reading and writing if the language isn't spoken where you live. I mean, obviously with the internet now, you can clearly reach out to people and meet people and speak online. But yeah, I mean, there are definitely times where, you know, and there are people out there, like I think of Professor Arguelles as one person, also Judith Meyer as another person, who tend to learn languages and read in them as well. Like Latin, for example, they both like Latin. But yeah, for me, I do enjoy the speaking. I really do. I like speaking to people. So that's often a priority just by default for me. And what languages do you speak with your with your polykitties, apart from Catalan, from Vanessa. Thank you, Vanessa. So I actually speak to them in English. I speak to my cats in English, weirdly. My wife and my daughter speak to them in Macedonian. I use their English names. I speak to them in English. I don't know why. It's maybe just a natural thing that I did. And oddly, like street cats and street dogs, I speak to in Macedonian. So yeah, there's a kind of a weird thing, but for my own, maybe because they're my babies and I wanted them to be bilingual, I don't know. Yorgos, do you believe anxiety and pressure can also be a cause in heart crisis among hyperpolyglots? You mean like kind of heart attacks and stuff? Possibly. I mean, look, people feel, if you feel pressured or you feel anxiety or stress, that has an impact on your body, and so yeah, I think it can be a cause of stress, of course, particularly if you care about what other people are saying and thinking, and what people might be writing about you, then it can be stressful, I guess. I guess it just depends on the individual. So different people react differently to different things. So knowing who you are and what's important to you is important. So yeah, why polyglot may be one question, but why internet polyglot is another, probably more important question of, do I want to sign up to that? And if you know that you have a tendency of being worried about what people say and think about you, then possibly have a real think about whether or not that's the path you want to take. I'll take one last question. Umberto, there we go. So, do you test yourself to determine your knowledge level in each language, and how? Can you give us some tips? So I will often sort of see if I can say certain things. If I can express what I want to express because it's meaningful to me, then that's a test of sorts. But I actually am one of those very rare language learners in this community where I love taking exams and formal courses. So I'm often tested externally by this. So the most recent one that I have studied in this way is Cornish. So I actually completed all of the levels of the Cornish language exams that you can do. And for that, I had to do reading, writing, listening, and speaking assessments in Cornish. And now I take part in different activities for the Cornish language community. I recently did an assessment in Scottish Gaelic as well for basic level. So I do like to do these kinds of things, and I find them a lot of fun. So yeah, I do myself, just seeing what I know and whether I want to know other things or whether there are external tests that I can do. Okay, I think I've got two more questions in here, so I'm guessing I can answer them. Sergio, is there a way to decide the next language you're going to learn based on the languages you already know? Trying to take advantage of what I already know. Yeah, so very often there will be a determining factor of what I already know, because it's easier to remember the vocabulary because you already have the mental hooks to be able to attach them and learn the differences. So it is, but often I find that it's actually complete accident. The languages come to me. I've been dabbling in Guerrier recently, which obviously, as a French speaker as well, it's a lot easier to understand Guerrier, but I find it quite interesting. I studied Ladino and Hackadia with Carlos Yebra Lopez at Oxford University for a couple of years, in fact. So yeah, there are languages that I study because they come to me that way, and because having those similarities really helps as well. So yeah, that can be helpful, but I often find the languages that stick with me and stay with me for the longer term are the ones that I get to then use actively or make friends and meaningful connections with, whether that's online or offline, because Cornish, for example, I use quite a lot, and clearly no one's speaking Cornish around me here in the Balkans, but I use it online an awful lot. So Kareem asks, how soon in the language learning process do you start learning how to use slang and colloquial words and expressions? I find they tend to come in a more natural way as I go.
I don't worry about them too much in the beginning, although I know some people like to do that. And if that motivates you, do it by all means. Sometimes some slang can be difficult to understand whether or not it's polite or not polite, and so it can be quite tricky. So I would say, be cautious with that kind of language. Also, is it understandable to the majority of people? Because sometimes it can come from certain groups where it's used and other groups it's not used or perceived to be more or less rude. So yeah, it's always important to kind of, I think, get the grounding in first and then move to that kind of stuff. Sometimes some of it comes up early, and that's fine. I take it as it's given to me. Hokkien, Fujian, Minnan Chinese dialect, Taiwanese, a focus study of Polyglot Conference 2025. Yeah, absolutely. So in fact, we're going to have courses in Mandarin, and definitely in Mandarin, definitely in Taiwanese, and in Paiwan, which is an indigenous language there on the island. And so we'll have those three for sure. There may be others that we can dig into, and talks hopefully on all of them. I would really hope that we'd hear about all of them. And Hakatu, this would be quite cool. So yeah, that's the hope. Brian would love to watch a polyglot movies. Do you recommend any movies about polyglots? Oh, I don't know any movies about polyglots per se. There are some documentaries and things that have been made, but I don't know about any films. There's the HarperCollins, which is a small film that was made many years ago. That should be Googleable. HarperCollins. That's quite funny actually. So yeah, you can definitely look that up. And then the final question here is and then I will have to go because I know it's time. What were some of the rudest comments you ever got, both on social media and in real life, and how do you normally deal with them? So yeah, online, anything and everything, from physical appearance to not speaking a language properly to only reading a couple of lines from a script. I've gone through phases. I went through a phase at one point replying, and then I don't typically reply to things like that anymore, because normally it's a psychological issue for the person writing them. I mean, if you feel that you need to do that, then I think you're not coming from a good place. So I feel quite a lot of pity for people who are doing that, and hope that they get better, and that their situation improves, and that they feel more confident in who they are and find their own way, more than anything else. For amusing, I got some so there are some funny comments that I've had that are rude. I got a comment once on a video where it was kind of, yeah, I mean, somebody wrote, I find this video hard to masturbate to, which I kind of had to laugh because it's a ridiculous thing to say on a language video, but it did make me, I've got to admit, I did almost spit out my coffee, because it was one of those kind of shock, but also quite funny moments. And I actually replied to that comment and said, I'm really glad that you found it hard to do that, because that was not the intention of my video. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, yeah, I get all sorts of people saying different things, but it normally comes from a place that they're in and something they're dealing with, and so I take it as that. Because why would you care what other people do or who they are or what their identity? Why would it? Doesn't really matter. Do you know what I mean? It's like, unless they're hurting you, why would you care? So I'm kind of that ilk of person. You do you and you be you. I respect you for you, and if you want to be different and you want to be who you are, that's fine. It's all fine. It's all good, as long as you're not hurting other people. I don't think it matters. So that's kind of that's my philosophy generally. I'm very much sort of live and let live, and let's just celebrate all of us and that we're all different, and that's actually quite nice. I like that we come at things differently, and I like that we have a different approach and different ideas and different histories and different thoughts and different experiences that we can all share together. It's just kind of, that's for me the beauty of diversity, to be honest. So yeah. Okay, I think that is me done. thank you so much for coming and for all of your questions, and I hope I answered everything. And feel free to reach out if you want to. I'm very happy to hear from you. You know where to reach me, speakingfluently.com, and join me at the Polyglot conference as well. So yeah, thank you so much, and all the best. And a huge thank you to the Polyglot Gathering team for giving me a space to speak, for allowing my voice to be heard as well. I really appreciate it. You do this every year, and every year I'm very grateful. And yeah, if I'm allowed, I will always come back to talk to you, because this is the fellowship that I searched for in the beginning, and this is what I really enjoy. And come and talk to me in Brno as well. I don't go to any of the lectures. I stand around and just like to look forward to talking to you. Take care, everyone. See you soon.